like to welcome you to the Donnie Glover Show. I'm the publisher of BeMoreNews.com, also Harlem Business Journal. And if you get a chance, pick up a copy of Unapologetically Black. I've been told that I do not promote it enough. So there, bam. All right, so we've had a busy week. You can check out BeMoreNews.com, also HarlemBusinessJournal.com. Those are our two news outlets, and we're pretty proud of them. So let's just go forward. Rashard Brooks, a 27-year-old black man, was shot and killed by an Atlanta police officer on the evening of June 12th, 2020. Brooks had resisted arrest, according to reports, and wrested or attempted to take a taser as he was wrestling with the police on the ground. And this is conflicting with other reports from eyewitnesses. But one thing is for sure, last night they burned down a Wendy's, the very same Wendy's they called the police on Rashard Brooks. And to say the least, this comes on top of other developments in Atlanta. The election, Atlanta or the state of Georgia had an election. And if there was ever a case of voter suppression, to have people standing in line for 8 hours in Atlanta just really brings to mind the concept of voter suppression. And mind you, Georgia is a Republican state. Atlanta, Fulton County is a Democratic stronghold. Similarly, here in the city of Baltimore, we had an election, and there are those who would argue, including myself, that there was some voter suppression happening here. And what I want to read to you is a statement from Sheila Dixon. Brandon Scott is the winner of the primary. And let me tell you, it was painful to see this, first of all, this concession speech. And I'll just share a little bit. Again, you can go to BeMoreNews.com. But it was very painful to see a woman get robbed 2 times in a row by the Democratic Party here in the state of Maryland. So she writes yesterday, I conclude my campaign the same way I began, by saying, thank you, Baltimore. Throughout this entire process, I've made it clear that it is in God's hands and not solely in mine. I am at peace with the conclusion, to my family, friends, and supporters, and on and on and on. It ends off with, for those who question my intent when inquiring about the counting process, I would like to say my inquiry was not directed towards any individual, but towards the current infrastructure in place. There is no infrastructure in place. You can steal an election in Baltimore at any time. All you got to do is pay the Board of Elections Supervisor Armstead Jones. To say the least, I'm going to keep my cool. My cameraman knows I'm about to go off, but I'm not going to go off. It's a sham. It's a hoax. It's a smack in the face of Fannie Lou Hamer, the greats from the Baltimore NAACP, including Lily Carroll, Mae Jackson, and all of the Enola P. McMillan. Speaking of which, we didn't hear one word from the Baltimore NAACP. Why? Because there was voter suppression. Long story short, when you tell seniors to stay home for COVID, and then you tell them you're going to have a mail-in election, and then you don't mail them a ballot. This is not complicated. Well, I'm going to try to keep my cool. I have a very, very dear colleague out in Portland, Oregon. All right, let me just give it to you. My college roommate lives out there, and he gives me the skinny on Portland just about every day. Now, I told you in the last broadcast how protesters, now mind you, Portland is 80%, 85, 90% white. But they got Black Lives Matter protests going on stronger than Baltimore. It's phenomenal. But there's something else that's going on in Portland. Have you ever heard, Calvin, have you ever heard of Antifa? Yes. These are the anti-fascists. Portland is a bastion. Oregon, the state of Oregon, it's a bastion for these weird white groups. I mean, I don't know any other way to paint it. Some are anarchists. Now, they're not racist. They're not racially oriented. They're pretty much, what I get is hippies that just want to get high and maybe cause some disruption. And if you're with causing disruption, then they'll help you. I'm not sure if it's the anarchists, but there are provocateurs who are going around dropping off cement and bricks. It's happened in Portland, and it's happened in Baltimore. We saw it with the Baltimore protests. These are not black people from Baltimore, Calvin. These are some people from elsewhere. Maybe they are related to the white people that are now living in my neighborhood, in Vacants, some of whom chase drugs, but some of whom have these backpacks. Have you seen them? Militaristic, tactical gear. Well, I don't know who's who and what's what, but I know they don't live in Sandtown, and they seem similar to what I saw when I went to Portland. A lot of backpacks, because they have a homeless problem in Portland. I mean, thousands of white homeless people. I've never seen anything like it. It's like a whole generation of white people just gave up. That's what it looks like. Tents everywhere. I mean, there's so many homeless people in downtown Portland. They go to the bathroom on the sidewalk. It's ridiculous. I've seen it with my own eyes. But it's also, some of these people have these backpacks and tents everywhere. So between Antifa, the anti-fascists, the anarchists, but last night there were several arrests made. It's rather complicated. They stormed the police station. I told you that last week. Well, they stormed another police station this week. Several arrests were made in the early morning hours Sunday as protests continued throughout the night. More than 100 demonstrators formed a group around 12:30 a.m. I get the phone call 3 o'clock our time. Hey, you'll never believe what happened. 12:30 a.m. Sunday, a march from downtown Portland up Vista Avenue towards Jackson Street. According to responding officers, one member of the group threw mortars and fireworks at one officer. Mortars! Hey, for the record, black people ain't throwing mortars, okay? Y'all can quit all of that. We ain't throwing cinder blocks and bricks and all of that. It's too heavy, too time consuming, might mess up our outfit. We'll do some other things, but that's not one of them. Y'all need to get this story right. Anyway, because the group had moved into a highly residential area and commercial grade fireworks were being set off, Portland police said they focused on moving the group back into the downtown area. Police were finally able to disperse the group around 2 a.m. Now, Portland, Oregon, San Francisco, Seattle. As a matter of fact, I got another call the night before about Seattle. Seattle has been having some riots. Now, it's a little blacker in Seattle, maybe 35%, but pay attention to the northwest part of the country. Some crazy stuff is happening there, and it's mostly white people. I mean, again, to have white people pushing these Black Lives Matter protests is very interesting. Which brings me to probably the most interesting read all day. And this one comes out of the New York Times. Incredible article by Keeanga Yamada Taylor. She writes, young people have exploded in rebellion over the grotesque killing of George Floyd. God rest his soul. We're now witnessing the broadest protest movement in American history. Do you agree with that, Cal? You don't? I find it hard to wrestle with because how do you compare it? And then when you think back to the 60s, I've heard people, there's one piece, I think it was Biden. Biden said, Joe Biden, Joe Biden needs somebody from the Nation of Islam with him to just put his hand on his shoulder when you're going too far. That's what he needs. I don't know any other way. I'm not a 45 supporter, but my God, this is the best we can get. I'll never forget the time Joe Biden said, black people, if you don't watch out, the Republicans are going to put you back in slavery. Now, my only question to the black people apologizing for this chicanery coming out of this individual's mouth is would the Jews allow him to say the Republicans are going to put you back into the oven? They would not tolerate it. He'd be out of politics by noon. Why do black people keep apologizing for this fool? Anyway, You got to go read the New York Times article by Keonga Yamada Taylor. She touches on, let me give you another point she makes. The Congressional Black Caucus offered a familiar list of the kind of police reforms that have failed for decades to end police violence. The Congressional Black Caucus needs a little sitting down and talking to you also. If you're the Congressional Black Caucus, you ought to advocate for black people. I don't want to hear about other people's issues. I want to hear about our issues. And a lot of times, like as a result of COVID, one thing the Congressional Black Caucus asked for was some money for black businesses. It turned out that they were asking for money for a study on black businesses, $10 million. You heard me. See, that tells me that the Congressional Black Caucus does not understand business. We're talking about trillions of dollars in this country. Black people alone have 1.5 trillion in annual disposable income. Why are we talking about pennies, nickels, coins? We get what we negotiate. My cameraman is laughing. He can't. You get what you negotiate. If you think small, you get treated small. A prominent Baltimore attorney told me that the difference between a black American drug dealer and an African drug dealer is that the black American is looking at kilos. The African drug dealer is looking at ships. We got to stop thinking small. Might be a bad industry or topic to relate it to, but for the sake of simplicity, you get the drift. We got to think big, you know, and kudos. I talked with a gentleman today up in New Jersey, and I was telling him how I am glad that Robert Johnson, you know, he asked for $14 trillion.
Now is the time to go big. Short answers to long, horrific questions about the stain of slavery are not going to solve the inequality problem. We need to focus on wealth creation and wealth generation. And to do that, we must bring the descendants of slaves into equality with this nation. And that's what I proposed in this $14 trillion proposal to provide reparations, not only for the sin or the atonement of the sin of slavery and Jim Crowism and desegregation, both de facto and de jure, but to cause America to live up to the concept and the notion that this nation was born on the idea of American exceptionalism.
My dear friend, colleague was saying 14 trillion is a smack in the face. I said, however, and he understands my point. My point is nobody of Johnson's stature has ever mentioned reparations nor put a dollar amount on it. So if he's 100 trillion off or 100 trillion too low or whatever, no one has ever made this before. And he set a precedent, just like Robert Smith. He set a precedent when he wiped out all of Morehouse graduating class of 2019 student loan. I thought that was phenomenal. And we need more. You know, Magic Johnson, he went out there and, you know, helped form this $100 million fund for minority businesses. That's good. And I'm liking these big numbers. I want to hear it more. And it's about time for Miss Oprah. You know, I know she does a lot of things, but it's time. We need to be talking about reparations. And one thing I've noticed, Calvin, people have stopped saying, we're not going to get it. The tide has turned. And so what this young lady was writing about is this new wave of activism. I don't care if it's bigger than the 60s or smaller. I know this is a different time and era. I know that there are lessons we can learn from the 60s and the 70s. I know that there are lessons we can learn from Africa, from South Africa. They've overcome apartheid in our lifetime. When you look at the first black presidents, you know, that movement all through the 60s, Ghana, Kwame Nkrumah, Julius Nyerere, Patrice Lumumba, as the United States was going through a struggle, so was Africa. Africa's still dealing with these colonialists. And now the new colonialists in Africa, on that note, are the Chinese. I read an article not long ago with their 13 police stations, Chinese police stations in South Africa. Are you kidding me? You got to go. Matter of fact, I would have never let you up in here. God bless the child that's got his own. I want to leave that with you. I also want to leave with you something my daddy said. A fool and his money will soon depart. Africa has all of the natural resources. It has fed the world forever. It's time, that more of us African Americans go back to Africa, start building some relationships, especially as this new wave of activism is all upon us. So Calvin, I think that's about it. We've touched Baltimore, we've touched Atlanta, we've touched Portland, we've touched Seattle, touched on New York City. I did have one other story. This is from Palmdale, California. Authorities in Southern California City, Palmdale, are investigating the death of a 24-year-old black man hanging from a tree near City Hall, which originally was described as an apparent suicide, prompting outrage in the community. The thing is, this is the second hanging in the past month. What's going on in California? So as much, and let me just also say, kudos, thank you, big ups to the white people who are not taking racism anymore, who are no longer being silent. I thank you. I think it was Edmund Burke says, the only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. So thank you to all of the people who support decency, righteousness, the basic American values, and to those who don't, shame on you, and may karma come around and bite you in the butt. My name's Donnie Glover, and this has been our report for this week. Thank you to Chosen Media. We got to come up. Hey, listen, we got to get a tagline for Chosen Media. I think it should be Chosen Media. What was it?
Many are called, but few are chosen.
Many are called, but few are chosen. Donnie Glover, thank you, Calvin, and we'll talk to you next time.